So, given the fixed amount of land, the grass will begin to disappear because it's being overgrazed and overused by the farmers. The townspeople will no longer be able to raise sheep because the private incentives of using the land for free outweigh the social incentives of using the land carefully. The land and resources will eventually be eaten up. This problem could have been prevented if the town had regulated the number of sheep each farmer could have, or auctioned off the right of the common land for grazing. If you remember, we talked about in our example, I believe it was back in chapter 10, about the pollution that's being produced by the aluminum company and other polluters into there, that the government sells permits to how much they can pollute each year to try to control the pollution. This is something similar that the sheep farmers in the town could have worked out a deal. Or alternatively, the town could have divided the common property between the citizens, thus turning the land into an excludable commodity. So, let's talk about some of the important common resources that get used on a daily basis that we do have to step in and have some type of monitoring with. Everything from clean air, water, congested roads, fish, wildlife, and etc. So let's talk about one of your case studies, and it's also, I believe, in your PowerPoint presentation. It talks about the difference between elephants and cows, and why our cows are not extinct and why elephants are. Elephants in Africa are a common resource because no one owns them. This means that no one has an incentive to make sure there's a sufficient number and that that they are preserved outside of the government. This is different from a cow, which is usually owned by a rancher. The rancher has an incentive to ensure that the cattle population on his ranch is maintained so that he can continue making a profit. So, governments could actually be more successful in making sure that the elephants is not extinct by allowing people to harvest the elephant or being able to have them on their private property, thus making the elephant a private good. The landowner would then have an incentive to preserve the elephants on their land and have a reason to. So, as you know, it would help the elephants if they became a private good. Someone would own them, someone would have a benefit in keeping them healthy or helping them repopulate. As of now, with them being not owned, then there's no one that has a private interest in it other than the government. So we've talked a lot about important things. One other thing we need to talk about too is property rights, the importance of property rights. With both public goods and common resources, the market outcomes will be inefficient because of the lack of well-defined property rights. We see that happen quite often. The absence of property rights can lead to a market failure, which also implies that in these situations, that the government could have improved the allocation of resources and increased in economic well-being. It is clear that the differences in the way in which businesses provide finances to products and the way in which governments do the same. By now, through all these chapters, you should be able to see the difference between the market process and the political process as an alternative way of providing goods and services to the market. Let's talk about a couple other examples of public goods, or some of the highways, snow removal, that kind of stuff. I want to mention those. I believe it's in your PowerPoint as well. In all of these instances, one could argue that the government intervention is necessary in order to achieve economic efficiency. But it's also about public welfare and making sure that everything that we send our elected officials in the office do, that they're able to take care of everyone, and also figure out a way to generate jobs and generate revenue to increase the local and national GDPs. So, what have you gotten so far from this chapter? We talked about defining characteristics of public goods and common sources, why private markets fail to provide public goods, what are some of the important public goods in our economy, and why the cost-benefit analysis of public good is both necessary and difficult to predict. So let's talk about Chapter 11 in review. What did we learn in Chapter 11? What do we need to take out of Chapter 11? And what could we possibly see on our tests? So, we learned that goods differ whether they are excludable or whether they're rival in consumption. A good is excludable if it's possible to prevent someone else from using it. A good is rival in consumption if one person's use of the good reduces others' ability to use the same unit of the good. Markets work best for private goods. We know that because they are excludable and rival in consumption. Markets do not always work well for other types of goods. Public goods are neither rival in consumption or excludable. Some of our examples of public goods include the firework display we talked about, national defense that we talked about, and the creation of fundamental knowledge, which is the overall education of us as citizens, whether it's culturally, academically, or skill developed. Because people are not charged for the use of public goods, they do not have an incentive to take care of them. They overuse them. They often see it as a free ride, something that they're getting free because their taxes or they've seen other people using it. So what this does is it makes private provisions a good, more untenable, and people are able to keep control of them better themselves. Therefore, governments provide public goods basing their decision on the quantity of each good on cost-benefits analysis. So the overall well-being of the good given to the society or the community based on the taxes that the community pays into it, where does the benefit outweigh the cost? So they use cost-benefits analysis, so make sure you're familiar with that a little bit. Common resources, which are rival in consumption but not excludable. We talked about some of the examples there. Was our grazing land example in the small sheep town. Also clean air and congested roads. You know, like we talked about, because people are not charged for the uses of common resources, they tend to overuse them and they use too much of it, and a lot of times therefore hurt future use or cause the governments to have to step in and create various methods to limit people from using the common resources or overusing them. So the main purpose of Chapter 11 was to address the types of goods that are free to all consumers. When goods are free, the market force doesn't always allocate the resources that we have in a private market. They're just not there, they're absent. You have to take in the well-being of the society or environment. Therefore, free goods such as playgrounds and public parks may not always produce the consumed amount of return that you think you would get in dollar figures or in a quantitative amount. But this is when we do rely on governments that can potentially remedy the market failure because we don't see the actual outcome or profit for the firm. And this will overall improve the economic well-being of the country or the town or the city. Therefore, doing with the public officials that we elect for them to do. So we've talked about that a little bit. We'll be moving on to Chapter 12 and 13, and we'll start to wrap it up pretty soon. You have your final coming up. Remember, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me, text me, or reach out and contact me any way that you can. All of this information should still continue to be in your PowerPoint presentations and in the book as you read through your chapters.